My brother Isaiah called me on a Thursday evening and said the house was in his name. He said our father had deeded it to him 3 years before he died, and that the Stark County recorder had the deed, and it was valid, and the house was his. He said he was telling me before he listed it so I would not be surprised. He said he was sorry if this was upsetting. I am an urban planner. I have worked. I want to describe the specific moment when I read the parcel number and felt the recognition before I had confirmed it. The deed was displayed in the recorder's portal document viewer, and I had been reading it from the beginning the way I read every property instrument, in order, each section in sequence. When I reached the legal description block and read the parcel number, I stopped. I read it again. I know the Stark County parcel numbering system. In our office, we work with these numbers constantly. In over 11 years, I have developed the kind of pattern recognition that comes from repeated exposure to any classification system. I knew by the number range that it was not from the west side of Canton where Clarendon Avenue is located. The number range suggested the east side. I did not act on this recognition until I had confirmed it because confirmation is the discipline I apply in professional work and I apply it equally in personal situations. I went to the Stark County Auditor's portal. I entered the parcel number. The result confirmed what I had recognized. A different neighborhood, vacant land, $4,200. I had known before I confirmed. Confirming made it usable. That is what confirmation does. It converts recognition into evidence. I had the evidence within 5 minutes of finding the deed. The evidence was in 2 public records that anyone could search. Professional fluency had found it quickly. The records would have shown it to anyone. I also want to say something about what it means professionally to be able to read a parcel number and know immediately that something is wrong. Most people who encounter a deed in a family dispute are not working with parcel numbers every day and do not have the pattern recognition I have from 11 years in the planning office. But the verification that I performed in seconds from pattern recognition can be performed in 30 seconds by anyone with access to the auditor's portal. The difference between what I did and what anyone else could do is speed, not ability. I recognized the discrepancy before I confirmed it. Anyone else would confirm the discrepancy in the time it takes to search the portal. The information is publicly available. The Stark County Auditor's property search is at the auditor's website. You enter the parcel number from the deed's legal description. The system shows you the property. If the property shown is not the property you expected, you have found what you need to find. My professional fluency found it immediately. 30 seconds of portal searching would have found it at the same speed for anyone. The resource is the same resource. The result is the same result. The only variable is whether you know to check. Now you know. Check the parcel number. Every time, the auditor will tell you what it belongs to. For the city of Canton for 11 years, and my job involves reading parcel maps, understanding how properties are described in official records, and knowing the difference between an address and a parcel number, and why that difference matters. When Isaiah said the word deed, I said I would like to see it. He said it was public record, and I should look it up myself. I went to the Stark County Recorder's portal that evening. I found the deed Isaiah was describing. It was recorded 3 years before my father died, exactly as he had said. My father's name as grantor, Isaiah's name as grantee. A quitclaim deed. I read the property description section. A deed describes the property it conveys through 2 mechanisms: a street address and a legal description that includes the parcel number assigned by the county auditor. I read both. The street address in the deed was my father's address on Clarendon Avenue in Canton. The address was correct. But the parcel number in the legal description was not the parcel number for the Clarendon Avenue property. It was a different number. I knew this without looking it up because I work with Stark County parcel data professionally and I recognize the number format. But I looked it up anyway. I went to the Stark County Auditor's property search and I entered the parcel number from the deed. The parcel number in the deed belonged to a vacant lot on the other side of Canton with no structures on it, assessed at $4,200. The deed that purported to convey my I want to explain why the legal description controls over the street address in Ohio and why this principle is not just a technicality. A street address is assigned by the local government for purposes of mail delivery, emergency response, and general navigation. Addresses can change when streets are renamed or renumbered. They can be stated incorrectly through simple error. They are not the official land record system. The official land record system in Ohio is the parcel identification system maintained by county auditors and linked to the county recorder's deed records. Each parcel has a unique number. The number corresponds to a specific piece of land with specific boundaries as shown on the county's official parcel map. When a deed describes a property by its parcel number, that description identifies a specific and unambiguous piece of land. Courts defer to the legal description because it is the authoritative identification while the address is a secondary reference. This principle protects the reliability of the public land record. If addresses could override parcel numbers, every deed with an incorrect address would create uncertainty about which property was actually conveyed. The rule that the legal description controls makes the land record definitive. When you know the parcel number in a deed, you know exactly what was conveyed. There is no ambiguity. The auditor's record shows you the parcel. The parcel map shows you where it is. The legal description is the identity. It does not change. It does not lie. It says exactly what was transferred. I also want to explain something about the relationship between the county auditor and the county recorder, and about why both records are needed to fully understand a deed. The county recorder holds the deeds. The county auditor holds the parcel records. When you record a deed in Ohio, the recorder files the deed instrument. The recorder's record shows the deed was filed and what it said. The auditor's record shows what the parcel number in the deed actually corresponds to as a piece of land. To fully understand what a deed conveyed, you need both records together. The recorder tells you what the deed said. The auditor tells you what the parcel the deed described is. If you read only the recorder's record, you see a deed with an address and a parcel number. If you also read the auditor's record for that parcel number, you see what the parcel number actually corresponds to. Only by reading both do you know whether the deed conveyed what it claimed to convey. I had read both that evening. Marcus had submitted both to the court. Judge Okafor had reviewed both at the hearing. The answer required both. One record alone was not sufficient. Both together were conclusive. The recorder is the deed. The auditor is the land. The deed describes the land. The auditor confirms whether the description is accurate. Use both. Father's house to Isaiah had described the wrong parcel. The address was correct, but the legal description identified a different piece of land entirely. In Ohio property law, when there is a conflict between the street address and the legal description in a deed, the legal description controls. The deed had conveyed the vacant lot. It had not conveyed the house. Before I go on, if this story connects with something real in your life, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely feel it. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. My name is Naomi. I am 38 years old. I want to say something about the quality of my father's character and about what it meant that he had maintained his will and met with his estate attorney regularly. My father had been a person who understood that what you intended needed to be documented if it was going to be honored. 31 years with the Postal Service had given him the institutional knowledge that documents were how intentions moved through bureaucratic systems and arrived where they were supposed to arrive. He had applied this knowledge to his personal affairs. He had a will. He had an attorney who maintained the file. He had told his 3 children that there was a will and that Grace was his attorney. He had not given us the specific contents because those were his business and his to disclose as he chose, but he had made sure we knew where to look. The equal distribution among 3 children was consistent with everything I knew about how my father thought about his children and about fairness. He had been a man who was careful about treating his children equally in the specific, deliberate way of a parent who understood that perceived favoritism damages sibling relationships in ways that outlast the parent. He had divided his time and his attention and his resources as evenly as he could manage, and the will had expressed this same principle applied to his estate. The deed that claimed to give Isaiah the house alone was inconsistent with everything I knew about how my father had operated. The parcel number confirmed the legal reality. My father's character confirmed the moral one. Both said the same thing. I also want to say something about the will and about the conversation my father had probably had with Grace when he prepared it. Equal distribution among 3 children is the most common disposition in wills prepared by parents of moderate means who love their children equally and want that love to be expressed in their estate documents with the same evenness they try to express it in their lives. My father had told us, each of us separately at different times over the years, that he had worked to be fair and that his goal was for each of us to know we were equally valued. He had said this in the specific way of a parent who had thought carefully about what fairness required of him and who had been intentional about demonstrating it. The will was the formal expression of the same intention. When I sat with Grace and read the will for the first time after my father's death, I had not been surprised by equal distribution. I had been confirmed in what I had known about who my father was. The deed claiming to give the house to Isaiah alone was inconsistent, not just with the legal document, but with the person the legal document expressed. Both inconsistencies mattered. The legal one was what the court addressed. The personal one was what my father had lived. Both said the house belonged to all three of us. The court confirmed what my father had lived. That was the outcome he had documented. That was the outcome the record delivered. And this is the story of how a parcel number in a deed's legal description, checked against the Stark County Auditor's property map, established that my brother's deed had described and transferred a vacant lot and not the house on Clarendon Avenue. And what an attorney named Marcus Eze, who had been practicing real estate law in Canton for 12 years, did with that auditor record in the Stark County Common Pleas Court. Now let me explain why the legal description controls over the street address and why this matters so much. When a deed is recorded in Ohio, it conveys a specific piece of real property. The property is identified in two ways: by its street address, which is a human-readable reference that most people understand, and by its legal description, which is the precise technical identification of the parcel as recorded in the county auditor's records and referenced in the county's official parcel map. The legal description is the authoritative identification. Courts in Ohio have consistently held that when a deed contains both a street address and a legal description, and the two describe different properties, the legal description prevails. The reason is that street addresses can change, can be incorrectly stated, and are not the official land record identification system. Parcel numbers and the legal descriptions derived from them are the official system. They are the system that the county maintains as the definitive record of property boundaries and identification. When you record a deed in Ohio, you are conveying the parcel described in the legal description. The street address is context. The parcel number is identity. The deed Isaiah had did not convey the house on Clarendon Avenue. It conveyed the vacant lot whose parcel number appeared in the legal description. The vacant lot was worth $4,200. The house on Clarendon Avenue, which my father had owned for 28 years, was worth considerably more. The difference between the parcel number in the deed and the parcel number for the house was the entire case. I called Marcus Eze the morning after. I want to say something about how Marcus Eze had structured the petition and about what made his approach effective. He had organized the filing in two distinct parts. The first part addressed what the deed actually conveyed by operation of law. The legal description controlled. The legal description identified a specific parcel. That parcel was not the Clarendon Avenue property. Therefore, the deed had not conveyed the Clarendon Avenue property. This part required no analysis of intent and no credibility judgments. It was the application of a settled legal principle to documentary evidence from two public records. The second part addressed why reformation was not available. The evidence did not meet the clear and convincing standard, and the existing estate planning documents contradicted the claimed intent. By structuring it this way, Marcus had established the outcome in the first part and used the second part to address the only argument that could have challenged that outcome. Judge Okafor had resolved the first part quickly and then applied the correct legal standard to the second part. The claim had not met the standard. The structure of the filing had made the path through the case clear. Marcus had known the law and the facts. He had presented both cleanly. The court had confirmed what both said. The house was estate property. That was always the answer. The records had always held it. I also want to say something about the specific period between when I found the discrepancy and when I called Marcus. I had spent about 2 hours that evening reading about the legal description controls principle in Ohio before I called him. I wanted to understand the doctrine before I described the situation to an attorney so that I could ask the right questions. I read the Ohio Revised Code provisions about deed execution. I read summaries of cases in which Ohio courts had applied the rule that legal descriptions control over addresses. I read about the Reformation doctrine because I had anticipated that Isaiah would make a Reformation argument. By the time I called Marcus the next morning, I had a basic framework for the legal issues, and I was able to describe the situation in terms that allowed him to quickly confirm or correct my understanding rather than spending the first call on basic education. He had confirmed that my understanding was correct and had then added the specific Ohio case law and the Reformation burden of proof analysis that went beyond what I had found on my own. The 2 hours of reading had been useful. It had made the attorney call more efficient and had allowed Marcus to move directly to the strategic analysis rather than the preliminary one. When you are dealing with a property dispute, understanding the basic legal framework before you call an attorney is time well spent. The information is accessible. Read it, then call. I found the deed. He had been recommended to me by a colleague in the city planning office who had used him for a property boundary dispute and had said he was methodical and clear. I described what I had found. He said, "Send me the deed and the auditor records for both parcels." I sent them within the hour. He called me back in 2 hours. He said, "This is exactly what it looks like." He said the deed's legal description identifies a parcel that is not the Clarendon Avenue property. He said the legal description controls over the street address in Ohio. He said the deed conveyed the vacant lot, not the house. He said, "I need to know what your father's will says." I said I did not know yet whether there was a will. He said, "Find out." There was a will. My father had prepared it with an attorney in Canton named Grace Mwangi 7 years before he died. It left his estate equally to his 3 children, Isaiah, my sister Pearl, and me. Grace had confirmed the will was in her files when I called her that morning. She said she had been expecting someone from the family to call. She said the estate needed to be opened. She said she had not been contacted by Isaiah's attorney, and she was glad I had found her. She had filed to open the estate in Stark County Probate Court within the week. The inventory listed the house on Clarendon Avenue, with its correct parcel number, as an estate asset. The vacant lot, which was the property actually conveyed by Isaiah's deed, was not an estate asset because my father had not owned it. Isaiah's attorney filed a competing I want to describe what Marcus Eze's legal analysis of the Reformation doctrine looked like and why the evidence in this case fell short of the clear and convincing standard. Reformation exists as a doctrine because courts recognize that documents sometimes fail to say what the parties intended them to say. A deed prepared by a non-attorney might have a transposed digit in the parcel number that everyone involved could confirm was an error. In that kind of case, with affidavits from both parties confirming the intended transaction and an obvious typographical error, reformation might be appropriate. But the burden is clear and convincing evidence precisely because allowing deeds to be reformed based on inadequate proof would undermine the stability of property titles. The evidence in this case did not approach that standard. Isaiah had no affidavit from anyone present at the deed signing. There was no testimony from the person who had prepared the deed. The estate attorney had not been consulted. The will actively contradicted the claimed intent. The magnitude of the discrepancy between the correct parcel and the described parcel did not suggest a simple typographical error. Marcus had presented this analysis clearly, and Judge Okafor had accepted it. The Reformation claim had required evidence that was not there. The will and the parcel records were there. They told a consistent story. The consistent story won. I also want to say something about what would have happened if the parcel numbers had matched, but the other facts were the same. If the deed had correctly described the Clarendon Avenue parcel but had been prepared without Grace's knowledge and had been executed 2 months before the will review or similar, the case would have been harder. Isaiah would have had a deed with the correct parcel and the Reformation doctrine would not have been the question. The questions would have been whether the deed was validly executed, whether my father had been competent when he signed it, whether there had been undue influence. Those are factually intensive inquiries that require testimony and evidence about specific events and conversations. They are harder to resolve than a parcel number comparison against an auditor database. The wrong parcel number made this case simpler than it might otherwise have been. It reduced the central question to a documentary comparison between 2 public records. That comparison had a clear answer. Cases with clear documentary answers are resolved more predictably than cases that depend on contested testimony about what someone intended or whether someone was pressured. The wrong parcel number was the specific feature that made this a clean case. Marcus had recognized this from the first call. He had said the parcel discrepancy is the case. He had been right. It was. It resolved cleanly. 2 public records, 1 comparison, 1 clear outcome. Claim arguing that the deed reflected my father's intention to convey the house and that the parcel number discrepancy was a drafting error that should be corrected by the court to give effect to the grantor's intent. Marcus's response was measured but direct. He said Ohio property law recognized the doctrine of reformation, under which a deed could be corrected to reflect the parties' actual agreement if there was clear and convincing evidence that the instrument did not express what was actually agreed. He said the burden of proof for reformation was substantial. He said the evidence in this case did not meet that burden. He said my father had had a will that left the house equally to 3 children, and that will was prepared 7 years before the deed. He said there was no evidence that my father had communicated an intent to change his estate plan and convey the house exclusively to Isaiah. He said the will was the document that expressed my father's stated intentions for his estate. He said a quitclaim deed prepared without the involvement of my father's estate attorney, using an incorrect legal description, was not clear and convincing evidence of an intent to override a will. The Stark County Common Pleas Court. I want to describe the specific experience of the hearing before Judge Blessing Okafor and what I noticed about how she handled the 2 parts of the case. The first part, the question of what the deed actually conveyed, she had resolved quickly and without visible deliberation. She had the deed and the 2 auditor records, one for the parcel in the deed and one for the Clarendon Avenue parcel in front of her. She said the legal description identified a parcel on the east side of the city. She said the Clarendon Avenue property was a different parcel on the west side of the city. She said the deed had conveyed the east side parcel and had not conveyed the Clarendon Avenue property. She said this in about 2 minutes, and she said it in the even tone of a judge confirming a legal principle rather than resolving a disputed question. For the second part, the reformation claim, she had taken more time. She had reviewed the submissions on this point carefully. She had asked Isaiah's attorney about the evidence. The attorney had argued the street address and had pointed to the 7-year gap between the will and the deed as evidence that my father's intentions had changed. Judge Okafor had said she did not find this sufficient for clear and convincing evidence. She had been thoughtful about the second part because it deserved thought. The answer remained the same. The evidence was not there. The will said what my father had intended. The parcel records confirmed what the deed had done. The 2 together produced the only outcome the evidence and the law allowed. I also want to say something about the practical experience of working on a family legal matter as a professional who already understands the relevant systems. My advantage in this situation was not legal expertise. Marcus provided the legal expertise. My advantage was domain knowledge about the specific public records involved. I knew the Stark County Auditor's parcel database. I knew how to search it and what the results meant. I knew the distinction between an address and a parcel number and why the parcel number was the controlling identification. This domain knowledge had allowed me to find the problem quickly and to explain it to Marcus clearly on the first call without needing him to educate me on how the records worked. We had been able to go directly to the legal analysis because the factual foundation was already clear when I called him. If I had not had this domain knowledge, I would still have found the same problem because the auditor portal is designed for public use and the verification requires nothing more than the ability to enter a number and read a result. My professional knowledge made it faster. The portal would have made it possible for anyone. The point is not that you need professional expertise. The point is that the tools are accessible and the verification is simple. If you are looking at a deed and wondering whether it conveys what it claims to convey, the answer is 30 seconds away. Take the parcel number, enter it, read the result. Assign the matter to Judge Blessing Okafor, who had been handling civil and property matters in Stark County for 14 years. She reviewed the submissions. At the hearing, she asked Isaiah's attorney to identify the specific evidence of the grantor's intent to convey the Clarendon Avenue property, given that the legal description in the deed identified a different parcel. The attorney said the street address in the deed established the intent. Judge Okafor said she understood the argument and that it was the basis for the reformation doctrine. She said reformation required clear and convincing evidence, and she had reviewed the evidence submitted and did not find it met that standard. She said the will, prepared 7 years before the deed with a different attorney, left the property equally to 3 children. She said there was no evidence of a communication between the grantor and the estate attorney about changing this plan. She said the deed had an incorrect legal description that identified a vacant lot. She said on the evidence before her she could not find by clear and convincing evidence that the deed had been intended to convey the Clarendon Avenue property. She declined the reformation claim. She confirmed the estate inventory as filed. She ordered the estate administered under the will. My father's estate was distributed equally among his 3 children. Each of us received an equal share of the house on Clarendon Avenue. The house sold 9 months after the ruling. Isaiah received the same 1/3 that Pearl and I received, which was his share under the will. The vacant lot was not part of the estate because my father had never owned it. Isaiah's deed conveyed nothing of value from my father's estate because it had described the wrong parcel. I want to say something before I go. I want to say something about the night I found the discrepancy and about who I called first before I called an attorney. I called Pearl. I had described what I had found, and she had asked me to explain the parcel number concept more fully because she did not work with parcel records, and the distinction was not immediately obvious to her. I had explained it the way I would explain it to a community member in a planning meeting. The street address is how you find the place. The parcel number is the legal identity of the place, and when they conflict in a deed, the parcel number wins. She had said so. The deed describes the wrong property using the right address. I had said exactly. She had been quiet for a moment. Then she had said, that is a very specific kind of error to make. I had said yes. I had said, it is. We had sat with that for a moment. Then I had asked her whether she had known about the deed before Isaiah called me. She said no. She said Isaiah had not called her. He had called me and no one else in the family. This information was also relevant. I told Marcus about it when I called him. He had noted it in the filing as part of the factual record. The family dynamics were not the legal case. The parcel number was the legal case. But the context shaped the picture. The picture was consistent with what the records showed. The records were the evidence. They were enough. I also want to say something about what I tell people now when they ask how to verify a deed. I tell them 3 steps. First, go to the county recorder's portal and find the deed. Read the entire deed. Identify the parcel number in the legal description section. Second, go to the county auditor's portal and enter the parcel number. Read the result. See what property the parcel number corresponds to. Note the address, the assessed value, and whether the property is residential or vacant. Third, compare the auditor's result to the property the deed was supposed to convey. If they match, the deed described the correct property. If they do not match, the deed described a different property. These 3 steps require no legal expertise. They require an internet connection and the ability to read the results. Both portals are free and publicly accessible. The process takes less than 5 minutes. I describe this process to anyone who is dealing with a family property situation and who has been presented with a deed. The first question is always, does the parcel number in the deed match the property the deed is supposed to convey? This question can be answered in 5 minutes using free public tools. If the answer is no, you have found the most important fact. If the answer is yes, proceed to the other questions. But ask this one first, always. The parcel number is the identity. The auditor has the identity. Check it. Not about Isaiah and not about who prepared that deed. About parcel numbers and about why an urban planner reads a deed differently than most people and about what I think everyone should know when they are looking at a deed. A street address is how people find a property. A parcel number is how the law identifies it. The 2 should match. When they do not match, the parcel number governs. The Stark County Auditor's property search is publicly accessible at no cost and allows anyone to search by address or by parcel number. If you are given a deed that purports to convey a property and you want to verify that it actually conveys what it claims to convey, you take the parcel number from the deed's legal description and you enter it into the county auditor's property search. The auditor's records will tell you exactly what property that parcel number belongs to and what it is worth and what structures are on it. If the result matches the property you expected the deed to convey, good. If the result is a vacant lot on the other side of the city, you have the information you need. Read the parcel number. Look it up in the auditor's records. Verify that the parcel number in the deed matches the property the deed is supposed to convey. The auditor's records will tell you within 30 seconds whether it does. Thank you for staying until the end. I want to say something about what I now do when anyone in my professional or personal life mentions a deed and about the first question I always ask. I ask, does the parcel number in the deed match the property the deed is supposed to convey? This is the first question because it is the question that can be answered in 30 seconds using a free public database and because a wrong parcel number makes everything else irrelevant. You do not need to analyze the deed's covenants or the grantor's intent or the validity of the acknowledgement if the deed's legal description does not describe the property in question. The threshold question is, what parcel did this deed convey? The answer is in the parcel number. The parcel number is in the deed. The deed is in the recorder's portal. The recorder's portal is publicly accessible. The auditor's portal shows you what the parcel number corresponds to. These 2 portals together, The recorder and the auditor give you the complete picture of what any deed actually did. The recorder shows you the deed. The auditor shows you the parcel. The comparison shows you whether they match. If they match, proceed to the other questions. If they do not match, you have found what you need to find. I ask this question first now. I will always ask it first. I learned why the hard way. The records gave me the answer the easy way. The records always give you the answer. You only need to ask them. I also want to say something about the specific question of what happens to a deed that describes a property the grantor did not own, and about how this is different from what Isaiah had expected. Isaiah had expected that the deed had conveyed the Clarendon Avenue house. What the deed had actually done was attempt to convey a property my father did not own. A quitclaim deed conveys whatever interest the grantor holds. If the grantor holds no interest in the described parcel, the deed conveys nothing. My father had never owned the vacant lot on the east side of Canton. He had had no interest in it. The deed had attempted to convey his interest in that parcel. His interest was zero. The deed had conveyed zero. Isaiah had received nothing of value from the deed, not because the deed was invalidated, but because the deed had operated exactly as intended by the law and had conveyed what the grantor had, which was nothing in that parcel. This is an important distinction. The deed was not voided. It was given full legal effect. When you give full legal effect to a deed that describes a parcel the grantor did not own, the deed conveys nothing. The legal effect of the deed was zero. The house had never been affected by the deed at all because the house was a different parcel and the deed had not described it. Isaiah had received what the deed conveyed. The deed had conveyed nothing. The law had given the deed full effect, and full effect was nothing. The house was always estate property. It had always been going to the three of us under the will. If this story made you feel something, write it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear the story of a woman whose brother-in-law had been paying the property taxes on his late mother's house from the estate account for 2 years without opening probate, and what the county auditor's tax record showed about who had been assessed as the owner of the property during those 2 years, and how that affected his claim to have been maintaining the property as its owner, it is waiting for you in the description below. Click it. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And if someone presents a deed that is supposed to have conveyed a family property, go to the county recorder and find the deed. Then find the parcel number in the legal description. Take that parcel number to the county auditor's property search. Look at what property that parcel number actually identifies. If it does not match the property the deed is supposed to convey, the deed conveyed the wrong property. In Ohio, the legal description controls over the street address. The parcel number in the deed is the parcel the deed conveyed. The auditor will tell you what that parcel is. The auditor's records are public. They are free. They are searchable by parcel number in seconds. The parcel number is the identity of the property. The identity does not lie. I want to tell you more about Canton and about the house on Clarendon Avenue and about what my father and that house had been to our family. Canton is in Stark County in northeast Ohio, southeast of Akron, and it has the particular character of a mid-size Ohio industrial city. The downtown has, I want to say something about what Pearl had said when I told her the full story of the proceedings and about her observation that sounded simple but has stayed with me. She had said, "Dad built that house into what it is over 28 years, and he wrote down what he wanted to happen to it, and he told an attorney, and the attorney kept the file, and then everything worked as designed." She had said this with the quiet satisfaction of someone recognizing that a system had functioned correctly. She was right. My father had done the work, the maintenance of the house, the preparation of the will, the relationship with the attorney. Grace had done the work, maintaining the file, responding when called, filing to open the estate. Marcus had done the work, understanding the legal issue, presenting it clearly, giving the court what it needed to rule. I had done the work, reading the deed, recognizing the discrepancy, making the calls. Each step had depended on the previous one. My father had made the first step possible by documenting his intentions correctly. The rest of the steps had followed. Pearl was right that everything had worked as designed. It works when the design is done right and when the people in the chain do their part. My father did his part. We each received what he intended. That is what a well-documented intention accomplishes. It arrives. It arrives because the record holds it and delivers it. The record held his. It delivered it to us. I also want to say something about what the house on Clarendon Avenue looks like and about why the description of my father's 28 years in it matters to this story. The house is a brick ranch with a covered front porch that my father had rebuilt about 15 years ago when the original boards had rotted through. He had done the work himself over 2 weekends, and the porch had the specific, slightly improvised quality of a repair done by a non-carpenter who understood the basic principles and who prioritized function over perfect finish. The garden beds on the east side had been his from the beginning. He had built them out of cedar boards in the first year and had amended the soil every fall and had grown the same rotation of vegetables every summer for 28 years. He had been generous with the surplus. The neighbors had known him for the garden the way some people are known for something specific that becomes part of how the block identifies them. When the house was sold after the proceedings, the buyers were a young family who had asked about the garden beds. Pearl had told them what our father had grown in them. The buyers had said they would keep them. I believe they have. The house is theirs now, and the garden he built is still there and still in use. That is what property that is properly documented does. It passes to the people it was intended to pass to, and then it passes again. Each passage is in the record. The record holds each passage. The chain continues. The bones of an earlier era of prosperity and the neighborhoods have the specific character of blocks where families have invested in their houses and stayed. Clarendon Avenue is in a neighborhood on the west side of the city where the houses are from the 40s and 50s, mostly brick or wood frame, with front porches and modest yards, and the deep-root character of a street where the trees were planted before the current residents were born. My father was named Harold. He had worked for the Postal Service in Canton for 31 years, and he had been in the house on Clarendon Avenue for 28 of those years. He had bought it on his own after my parents separated, and it had been his in the specific, complete sense of the word. The place where he had organized his life and maintained his routines and received his children, and where the evidence of his preferences and his years was in every corner. He had been a careful man about the house. The gutters were cleaned every fall. The furnace was serviced every year. The porch boards he had replaced himself when they needed it, working on a Saturday morning with the specific, unhurried competence of a person who understood that maintaining a house was a series of tasks that were done correctly and in sequence and not rushed. The house had the quality of a house that has been maintained by someone who understood maintenance as a responsibility rather than a chore. I want to say something about my professional relationship to Parcel records and about what it means to work with them every day and then encounter them in a personal context. I have spent 11 years in the Canton City Planning Office working on zoning, land use, and development projects. Parcel numbers are the fundamental unit of my work. Every project begins with parcel numbers. Every map I work with is organized around parcel numbers. The Stark County Auditor's parcel data is a system I know the way a librarian knows the catalog, not as an external reference to be consulted, but as a professional language I think in. When I read the deed and saw the parcel number and felt the recognition that something was wrong before I had even confirmed it, that recognition came from 11 years of professional fluency with exactly this kind of record. I knew I want to end with something about maps and about what the parcel map shows when you look at two parcels side by side. The Stark County Auditor's GIS map is publicly accessible, and it lets you see any parcel in the county in its geographic context. When I had pulled up the parcel from the deed in the GIS viewer, I could see it as a small irregular lot surrounded by other lots on a street I had never been to on the east side of the city. No structure, no address marked. Just a blank lot in a residential neighborhood where the surrounding lots had houses on them. The lot was simply there, accessible, part of the county's inventory of land, belonging to someone who was not my father. I then pulled up the Clarendon Avenue parcel in the same viewer. The map showed the lot with the house footprint visible, the porch extension at the front that my father had rebuilt, the outline of the garden beds at the east side of the lot, two parcels in the same county, two completely different properties. One of them was in a deed that had tried to convey the other. The map made the difference visible in the most literal possible way. Here is the lot the deed described, and here is the house it claimed to convey, and they are not the same shape in the same place on the same street. The map does not lie, the parcel record does not lie, the legal description controls. My father's house was his, and then it was ours. The map had always said so. The records had always held this. I had looked. I had found it. That was enough. I also want to say something about what the GIS parcel map means as a public resource and about why I believe it should be more widely known and used. The GIS map in the Stark County Auditor's portal is the same tool I use in my professional work at the City Planning Office. It shows every parcel in the county with its boundaries, its parcel number, its address, and the footprint of any structures on it. It is updated regularly as parcels are created, modified, or consolidated. It is publicly accessible at no cost and requires no account. When you enter a parcel number in the Auditor portal and click the map link in the results, you are looking at the same map that county officials, title companies, and real estate professionals use to understand the physical reality of a piece of land. The map does not interpret, it shows. The parcel I found in the deed showed as a small blank lot surrounded by structures that were not it. The Clarendon Avenue parcel showed as the house and the lot I had grown up visiting. The map showed me what anyone could have seen, two completely different places. The information was not hidden. It was not technical. It was right there in the publicly accessible GIS map that the Stark County Auditor maintains for exactly this purpose. Use the map. Enter the parcel number. Look at what comes up. If it does not show you the property you were expecting, you have found what matters. The map held the truth. The truth was always accessible. I accessed it. Now you can too. Format of Stark County parcel numbers. I knew the rough geographic correspondence between parcel number ranges and neighborhoods. I knew the parcel number in the deed was not from the Clarendon Avenue neighborhood. I looked it up to confirm, because confirmation is part of how I work, but I had known before I confirmed. The professional knowledge had been the relevant knowledge in this situation, and it had arrived in the moment I needed it. I want to describe what the Stark County Auditor's property search shows when you enter a parcel number and why the information it provides is so complete. The Stark County Auditor maintains an online property search portal that is publicly accessible at no cost and requires no login. You can search by owner name, by address, or by parcel number. When you search by parcel number, the result shows the current owner of record, the property address, the legal description, the assessed value for tax purposes, the tax district, and a link to a GIS parcel map that shows the property boundaries and its location relative to surrounding parcels. The GIS map link is particularly useful for verifying that you are looking at what you think you are looking at. You can see the property on the map and confirm whether it is a residential structure or vacant land or a commercial property and where it is in the city. When I searched the parcel number from Isaiah's deed, the results showed owner as a name I did not recognize, property address as a street on the east side of Canton, assessed value $4,200, tax description showing vacant land, and a GIS map showing an empty lot with no structures. The Clarendon Avenue house was worth considerably more than $4,200. It had been my father's home for 28 years. It had structures. It was not vacant land. It was not on the east side of Canton. The parcel number in the deed described none of these things. The deed had conveyed the wrong property. I want to explain something about why parcel numbers get confused in deeds and about the most common ways a wrong parcel number ends up in a deed's legal description. There are several ways this can happen. The first is simple typographical error. Someone transposed digits or made a data entry mistake when preparing the legal description. The second is that the preparer used an old legal description from a previous deed on the same property, and the parcel number had changed when parcels were replatted or consolidated. The third, which is the possibility that applied here, is that someone deliberately inserted a parcel number that did not correspond to the property described by the address. I am not in a position to say definitively which of these applied to my father's deed. What I can say is that the discrepancy was complete and significant, not a transposed digit that might explain a simple error, but a parcel number that corresponded to a property in a different neighborhood with a completely different character. Marcus had noted this in the filing. He had said the magnitude of the discrepancy was not consistent with a simple typographical error. The court did not need to resolve which explanation was correct. The deed described the wrong parcel. That was the legal fact. The rest was relevant to the credibility of the reformation claim, but not to the outcome of the initial question of what the deed conveyed. I also want to say something about Grace Mwangi and about what it meant that she had prepared the will 7 years before the deed, and that she had maintained the file through my father's death. Grace was an estate and probate attorney in Canton who had a reputation in the community for thorough and accessible work with families navigating estate planning for the first time. My father had come to her through a referral from his church, and she had prepared the will with the specific care of someone who understood that estate planning for a person of moderate means with 3 children was not a complex matter legally, but was a significant matter personally. She had talked with my father about what he wanted, and she had prepared a document that said what he had told her he wanted. He had reviewed it with her. He had signed it. It left his estate equally to his 3 children. It said this clearly. Grace had maintained the file. When I called her, she pulled it while I was on the phone and confirmed every provision. She said she had not been contacted about any change to the estate plan. She said she had not prepared the deed. She said she had not known about the deed until I told her. She said she was glad I had found it and that she would file to open the estate immediately. I want to describe the Reformation doctrine and why it did not succeed here and what it would have required to succeed. Reformation is an equitable remedy available in Ohio courts that allows a deed or other instrument to be corrected when it does not express the actual agreement of the parties due to mistake or fraud. To obtain reformation, the party seeking it must prove by clear and convincing evidence, which is a higher standard than the preponderance of the evidence standard used in most civil cases, that the instrument as written does not reflect the actual agreement of the parties, and that the actual agreement was as the reformation claimant describes it. In a deed case, this means showing by clear and convincing evidence that the grantor and grantee had actually agreed to convey the property described by the address rather than the property described by the parcel number, and that the legal description was inserted by mistake. Isaiah's attorney had argued that the street address in the deed was the evidence of intent and that the parcel number was a mistake. Marcus had responded that this was the argument in the abstract, but that the concrete evidence did not support it. The will left the house to 3 children. There was no testimony from anyone with knowledge of a conversation in which my father had expressed an intent to convey the house to Isaiah alone. There was no evidence from Grace or any other attorney that my father had sought to revise his estate plan. The street address in the deed was consistent with either a genuine intent to convey the house or with a deed that had the right address but the wrong parcel number for a different reason. It was not clear and convincing evidence that my father had agreed to convey the house to Isaiah. Judge Okafor had applied the standard correctly. The evidence did not meet it. I want to say something about Pearl and about what the distribution meant for all 3 of us. Pearl is the oldest of my father's children. She had been in Columbus for 15 years working as a social worker, and she had come back to Canton for the funeral and had stayed for several weeks in the period after. She had not known about the deed until I told her. She had been quiet on the phone when I described what I had found. Then she said that sounds like something Naomi would find. She said she had been thinking that someone should look at the records and she had not been sure how to start. I said I started with the recorder. She said yes. She said of course you did. I said I work with parcel records every day. She said yes. She said and it came out right. I said it came out correctly. The house was divided 3 ways. Each of us received what our father had intended when he sat with Grace 7 years ago and told her what he wanted. Pearl's share came to her the way my father had planned. That is what estate planning that is done correctly does. It delivers what was intended by the person who intended it to the people they intended to receive it. There is something I want to say about the $4,200 vacant lot and about what happened to it in the proceedings. Isaiah's deed, which had conveyed the vacant lot rather than the house, was not voided in the proceedings. The deed had legally conveyed the vacant lot to Isaiah because that was the property it described, and that was what the law recognized it to have conveyed. My father had not owned the vacant lot. The deed had conveyed a property my father did not own. A grantor cannot convey title they do not hold. A quitclaim deed conveys whatever interest the grantor has. My father had no interest in the vacant lot because he had never owned it. The deed had conveyed to Isaiah whatever interest my father had in that parcel, which was nothing. Isaiah received nothing from the deed, not because it was voided, but because it had conveyed a property my father did not own. The deed was legally operative as to the property it described. It conveyed nothing because the grantor had nothing in that parcel to convey. The house was not affected by the deed at all because the house was a different parcel and the deed had not described it. I want to end with something about maps. My work involves maps every day. I look at parcel maps to understand where boundaries are, which properties adjoin, which other properties, how parcels relate to streets and to each other, and what can be built where. The county parcel map is the record of how the land in a county is divided and identified and owned. Every parcel has a number. Every number corresponds to a specific piece of land. The correspondence is exact, and the records are maintained by the county auditor and are publicly available and are searchable. When I look at a deed and read a parcel number, I am reading the specific identification of a specific piece of land in that system. If the number does not correspond to the land described by the address, the deed is describing two different things. The law chooses between them. The law chooses the parcel number. The parcel number identifies the land. The land the deed conveyed was the vacant lot. The vacant lot was not my father's house. My father's house was a different parcel. A different parcel in a different neighborhood with a different value and a different history and a different set of people whose lives had been shaped by it. The parcel map had always been clear about this. The auditor record had always been clear about this. I looked it up. The record showed what was true. The record always shows what is true. That is what records are for.